Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about the latest Star Wars film, which is Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi. This film is directed by Rian Johnson, who looks like Rian Johnson when you look at his name, but I guess it's pronounced Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson's done films like Looper, Brothers Bloom, and Brick. So Star Wars Episode VIII is kind of his first big blockbuster film. I guess whoever you're talking to, some might say Looper was that first blockbuster film for him, but for me personally, I think this current Star Wars film is probably one of his bigger projects he's ever taken on. But anyway, back to Star Wars. Um, Star Wars: The Last Jedi takes place immediately after the events of Episode 7. I'm going to try to keep this review and my comments on the review as broad as I can. So just in case you haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, hopefully this review will not spoil anything for you. I'm just giving you my opinion of how I felt about the film without spoiling anything. So that's kind of how I'm going to approach this review for those who are wondering. But anyway, this film takes place, like I said, immediately after the events of The Force Awakens. Rey's giving her I guess this is probably the only. So if you haven't seen Force Awakens, this is just kind of something that happens towards the end that sets up this film. So like I said, that's probably the only thing, the least bit spoilery in this review at all. So that's just to let you know. So she basically gives his lightsaber back, wants to become one of his students, trying to figure out, what exactly Luke has been up to all this time. And they really need Luke Skywalker because the First Order is really getting aggressive. The resistance is having a hard time, finding places to hide out, while they plan on, coming up with a plan of taking the First Order down. So this film is pretty much all. It's really about the resistance kind of finding a new place to go to while also still, making big plans of what to do about the First Order, take him down for good. But they also have to be careful because the First Order, if they do track him down, they have no problem killing whatever planet they're on, whatever base they're on, no matter, who's, in charge of that base. They'll kill anybody in their way that will get in their way. Supreme Leader Snoke's orders are very much heavy here, and his orders are to kill at will. If they're in the way, kill them off. We got to do whatever we can to make sure that Luke Skywalker dies and that the resistance is gone so the First Order can live. So that's really what The Last Jedi is about without spoiling anything. And as expected, Rey's stories continued, Kylo Ren's stories continued, his struggles of becoming a Sith Lord are also continued, kind of his hesitations of becoming a Sith Lord. Obviously, Luke Skywalker gets a lot to do in this film since he really doesn't given a lot to do in The Force Awakens besides being talked about a lot and being a key focus of the last scene of that film. And as expected, and unfortunately, since Carrie Fisher passed away, it was kind of difficult to watch, Leia's continuation in this film, knowing that Episode 9 is probably not going to do a lot with her since Carrie Fisher is gone in real life. But they do very much continue her story here, and it is a little tragic to kind of watch this film knowing it's kind of her last film. So that was a little difficult as a Star Wars fan. But anyway, on to my positives and negatives of The Last Jedi. Like I said, Rey's story, Luke's story, Kylo Ren's part in the story, and Leia's story in this movie are all very, very good. I was very happy with all four of those characters as far as how their role was in the story. They definitely continued Rey's story, covered a little bit more about her past, potentially who her parents might be. Um, Everything you would expect about a continuation of Rey. Obviously, how does the Force affect her? Is she really going to become a Jedi? Is Luke's training going to help her become that Jedi that we think she might become? We find out more about Luke. We find out kind of why he vanished from people, kind of why he chose to not really stay in touch with a lot of people over the years. So they do go over that. Like I said, with Kylo Ren, there's still kind of that struggle of, he wants to become a Sith Lord, but there's so many problems and so many things that he's still holding on to that are, preventing him from becoming that Sith Lord that he always wants to become and become Supreme Leader Snoke's ultimate apprentice for something like this. And Leia's struggle of, finding places for the Resistance to continue to hide out at after the First Order keeps continuing to find, where they are. And, it's hard for them to plan out things because the First Order always gets there first. So Leia's struggle is obviously, how can we keep the Resistance alive and protected while, we're still planning on, how the First Order can be taken down. So her role in this, I thought, was very effective as well. There's little characters in it that are like little groundhog characters that are on the island that Luke is living on when Rey finds him. They're called porgs, I think. Really cute characters. They get a lot of cute things to do. Um, I liked all the jokes that were used with the porgs. They weren't as annoying as some people might have feared they could have been. They're definitely not a Jar Jar Binks of this trilogy. Really liked what they did with the porgs here. They were very adorable, very funny. So for those who want another cute Star Wars character in their roster, the porgs I think are definitely going to join that rank. They also continue Finn's story here. I didn't bring him up earlier when I was talking about being completely happy with Rey's story and Luke's and Kylo Ren's and Leia's story. I do like how they continued Finn's story. Unfortunately, him and Rey don't get a lot of pairing to do in this film. You know how in the Force Awakens they were given a lot of scenes where the two of them have to figure things out and figure out situations and be in action scenes together and so forth. Unfortunately, Finn is paired with a character named Rose in this movie. I like the character of Rose; she was fine. Obviously, Finn was fine here. I liked how his story was continued. There's still a lot of Finn you remember from The Force Awakens here that's continued here and pursued here, and probably going to be pursued even further in Episode 9 as well. So I like how they continued his character. They did things with him I wasn't completely happy with, but I like how they continued his story. They kept him relevant, and they give him plenty to do, probably for what's going to happen with him in Episode 9. There were some impressive CGI in this film. I would say Supreme Leader Snoke alone, whenever he's on screen, talking to Rey or talking to Kylo Ren, the CGI that they use for him is really, really impressive. You really kind of have to know that that's Andy Serkis to really kind of step back and realize that that's his voice being applied and probably a motion capture suit being applied for him being there on the set and everything. Really impressed with the CGI. There is a comment I have about the CGI in the negatives, though, coming up here pretty soon. But for the most part, when they have to use CGI, like spaceships battling in space or Snoke being, the main focus of the shot and so forth, a lot of those shots are really impressive with the CGI in this movie. There's also tons of moments of levity in this film, and I kind of like how they did that because The Last Jedi does have a lot of really dark moments in it, and you kind of had to have moments of levity to make the film fun again. So Rian Johnson, thankfully, or I keep calling him that, Rian Johnson, thankfully, realizes that and has fun with certain situations. So for General Hux, for example, played by Domhnall Gleeson from Force Awakens and continued here in this Star Wars movie, a lot of the things that he does and says have moments of levity to him, like a character jokes around about it and so forth. So there's just fun little things like that, I think, that really help make the film feel more fun. The film also has a strong message on the importance of a moral code. I think this is definitely present with Rey's character. There's a lot of opportunities for her to kind of turn dark or to go a darker direction with her life, but she realizes that by doing that she's not going to get to the place that she wants to be. That's not going to give her the answers about her parents that she wants. That's not going to give her Luke Skywalker's trust. That's not going to obviously, Kylo Ren probably might be happy with her turning darker and so forth, but I like how they played around with this important idea of keeping your if you have a moral code that really kind of keeps you in the right path in life, that helps you keep making the right choices, helps you stay in touch with the right people and to have the right mentors to help you further your knowledge of something. I like how this film does pursue this message of the importance of a moral code and kind of how keeping this moral code at all times is very important, because there could be a very dark situation that could happen in your life, but you still have that moral code that will very hard thing to talk about here, that will keep you from turning into that dark thing that you always feared that you might become. So I like how the film plays around with this idea. So I guess I'm just going to let The Last Jedi tell you this message a little better than I am, because I'm clearly not doing a very good job at that. But I like the film's message of the importance of a moral code. There's also many nods and references to the original trilogy in this movie. Can't talk about this one too much, unfortunately, but let's just say if you're very familiar with the original Star Wars trilogy, you've watched it multiple times like I have over the years, and there's characters and there's, holograms and things of that nature that you strongly remember from the original trilogy. I think you're going to be very happy with this movie because Rian Johnson, does make a lot of nods and references to the original trilogy that keep this film fun while also having a lot of nostalgic values to this movie. But for my negatives of this film, unfortunately, going back to my CGI comment from earlier, this is a very CGI heavy film. And unfortunately, that's a little unfortunate because J.J. Abrams did do a lot of practical effects in his Star Wars film in The Force Awakens, though there was a lot of CGI in that movie for sure, too. But, like, for example, when BB 8 is being taken away in that net, that character. That small character on the horse that Rey was stopping in The Force Awakens near the beginning of that film, that character was practical. That was a person in a costume doing that. Or, for example, Simon Pegg was in Force Awakens. You wouldn't know this, but, because he has a costume on. But he was the character where Rey would turn in things for money, and, he was like 3/4 portions and all that kind of stuff. That was a person in a costume doing that. So there's just small. It really does help to do things practically in a film. And I think that's one thing in 2015 a lot of filmmakers really realizing, like with Mad Max Fury Road with George Miller. He did a lot of that stuff practically in that film. J.J. Abrams did a lot of stuff practically in The Force Awakens. Unfortunately, Rian Johnson does a lot of CGI choices in this movie that I think could have been done practically. There's just a lot of characters, a lot of ways of getting a character onto a screen that are done with CGI that I think could have been done practically the way J.J. Abrams did. So, unfortunately, there was more CGI in this film that I would have liked. It is very good CGI, but sometimes you just can't beat a good practical effect. So, that's one downside of this film is there could have been much more practical effects than Disney and Rian Johnson chose to go with. Benicio Del Toro plays a character in this film. I won't say too much about him, just because I don't want to, get into spoiler territory or anything like that either. But he plays a character named DJ. At least that's what the internet sources claim that his character's name is DJ. Very weak character. I was not interested in this character. I get why he's there. They need to track down this character to do certain things in this film. I just was not interested in him. I hope episode 9, if they do continue his character, does more interesting things with him, because I really was not very intrigued by this character that he played in this film. Just a very weak, uninteresting character. Character of DJ played by Benicio Del Toro, I was just not very happy with in this film. The Act 1 of this film is also very X-Wing heavy. Unfortunately, before we go immediately back to Rey and Luke on that island, like a lot of people were hoping that this film would immediately open to, there's just a lot of X-Wing sequences, which is fine. X-Wings are cool, and, they got to have scenes like this in a film like Star Wars to, make it fun and everything. I thought it was a very X-Wing heavy Act 1. It just felt like they got on for a really, really long time. I understand, that there's characters that they reference and things that come up later in it and stuff like that, but Act 1 felt very X-Wing heavy to me. I felt like they really could have brought things down back to the ground much sooner than they did, so that's just a nitpick from me that I thought they could have done better with. Also, Maz Kanata doesn't get a very big role in this film, and unfortunately, she was a very important part of Rey learning about her past in Force Awakens. We really don't see a lot of her in this movie. So Lupita Nyong'o, or if you're a fan of her, or if you're a fan of the Maz Kanata character, she doesn't get a lot to do in this movie. Probably nothing more than 30 seconds worth of screen time, I would say. And that's really too bad because she's kind of an important part of this new trilogy. So would have liked to see more Maz Kanata. Hopefully episode 9 will fix this. Also, I thought they could have kept more mysteries open for episode 9. They wrap up a lot of things in this film, which is fine. But unfortunately, because there is one more chapter left in this trilogy, you really kind of have to keep certain things open. Empire Strikes Back kept that whole thing about Han Solo going into carbonite, being frozen in carbonite, and they kept that mystery open for the Return of the Jedi. They kept the mystery open between Luke and Darth Vader, and is Luke going to turn dark for him and everything like that. Unfortunately, Episode 8 doesn't keep a lot of those mysteries open, which I guess is fine for J.J. Abrams if he really wants to make a completely different Star Wars film in Episode 9. But unfortunately, that does wrap up a lot of things, so they really kind of have to come up with a lot of new material that they can cover over one film in Episode 9. So 9 out of 10 for me for this new Star Wars film, guys. Really like the film a lot. I highly recommend it. This review is a lot longer than I thought it would be. 9 out of 10 for me. I highly recommend The Last Jedi. Not the best Star Wars film. I think Force Awakens is better, but I think you're going to like this film if you like Star Wars.